Today's guest is a network engineer, cyber security specialist and forensic examiner. Over the past 20 years in the IT industry, he has been keeping his clients' networks safe and secure. Today he's going to share with you new insights, ideas and information to avoid becoming a cyber victim. Would you please help us welcome to the Livestream, Lance Wantenaar. Welcome.
Daniel, thank you.
Well, I know this is a big problem. Cybersecurity is a $6 trillion problem globally. Can you help us understand why it's a $6 trillion problem?
There's many levels to it. So there's the cybersecurity problem, which deals with things like data theft, compromise, stealing bank details, business fraud, romance fraud, anything like stolen identities, which then also deals with credit card theft, identity theft, impersonating people to then do things like fraud, getting fraudulent loans, or taking over email accounts, or even taking over merchant accounts. You've also got the other aspects, such as compromising businesses and then using things like ransomware to get money out of businesses, which they then steal the data, then either publish or they try and unencrypt it. But a lot of people are finding that even things like ransomware, the encryption doesn't always, or the decryption doesn't always work. So you end up having a data loss as well. So the business then has the cleanup costs afterwards. The other aspect that happens is you can also get destructive attacks that are happening. And that's something that's happened with Ukraine, with the war on Ukraine. There were a couple of attacks before the war started, which destroyed a lot of infrastructure for telecommunications, which then had a big impact on signaling for aircraft and a number of other areas. So it's quite a wide area that can be focused, and the industry is broken up in the different areas. The main area that I used to work in was incident response, which investigated how these incidents happened and then building out a timeline on that. I then migrated into focusing specifically on cyber fraud. And the area which I really focus on is how to prevent fraud from being or from happening when it comes to businesses. And then if something does happen, understanding what was the fraud scheme behind it. How did the business get targeted? How was a person targeted? And then understanding all these components so you can then build either a process or a technology to then help protect people and protect their businesses. Now, that also ties into, as I said, the main topic, which is where I started looking at psychology and understanding how psychology has been integrated into all of these attacks and how they manipulate people.
There's some research done recently, and it said that 59% of Americans report they have experienced cybercrime. Now, I know my wife, she's been a victim of that. She's had the credit card schemes before. Somebody's called through, go onto this website, check your account, and they quickly got all of her details. Also, 70% of small businesses are completely unprepared for a cyber attack. You know, just this week I received an email from a family business to say that their business had been attacked and a virus had been uploaded into their computer, and it really disrupted all of their operations. Also, 88% of professional hackers can infiltrate an organization within 12 hours.
Yeah.
That's incredibly fast, considering that there's it's all virtual. You can't see them. It's different when somebody's trying to break through your front door. But these people, 12 hours, and you can't even see them. I mean, these are some pretty scary numbers. In terms of an example of cybercrime, could you give us a couple of more of examples of just really basic ones that are happening maybe on social media or via text messages? What are some really common ones that we're seeing around the world today?
The most common ones about fraud is actually stealing people's identities, because that's the entry road into how they either get access to businesses or how they get access to people's accounts. So The key thing is that once they've got access to an email account or they've got access to a corporate account, that is leverage. That is the entry point. Because that entry point means that they can then either upload content to a business email account and then execute it, which will then do something like start encrypting files and start causing problems. The other thing that happens is that they can then direct conversation. So they can either get people to click on links or take over the accounts completely and then defraud people in that way. It just depends on which attacker is targeting the business and what their modus of operandi is and what their end goal is. Is it stealing data, or is it getting actual access to financial accounts? Mm-hmm. So it depends very much on what their working practices are. One of the things that I saw recently is there was a published case where somebody's been stealing Facebook identities and then using those Facebook identities and selling them on for affiliate schemes or selling the data on. And he's supposedly making $150 per identity. And he had significant amount of identities, multiples of millions. So he was looking potentially, even if his claim of $150 is high, if you took it down to $10, you're still talking about millions of dollars that he's making just on manipulating that data. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very big challenge in that regard to manage all of these things. The most basic thing is looking at the emails and understanding the context. People don't always look at the context of the emails, and that makes it very, very challenging because you tend to react very emotionally to it, mm-hmm. and you can tend to make mistakes very, very easily. The other thing that happens is that when you multitask, you're not paying attention to the content really very closely. So if you're just scanning the email, it might present itself correctly as it's coming from either a business or a bank or any of those multinational organizations, and it looks okay. But when you click on the link and then you enter your details, now you've already lost access. Now you've already given your details away. And that's just a very quick leverage. And those are two of the main things that I've seen so far in all of the phishing campaigns or any of the integrations that I've seen or the interactions I've seen, is that people tend to react very emotionally to the content. And that's the stepping stone into much larger problems. And that's where it becomes really the key thing for me, is understanding exactly how these things function to then look at a way of educating and also protecting.
Mm. I think I'm very popular in Nigeria in the past 2 weeks. I'm very popular. I've got all these friends from Nigeria adding me on Facebook. And what I've seen over the past 2 weeks is I had a fake account. So first of all, there was somebody with a fake account, mm-hmm. and it looked like me. So the banner on Facebook was the same, the profile pictures, the family photos, all the links were the same. And they'd begun to have conversations with my followers. And my followers, because the language was very similar, they thought that I was selling a Bitcoin opportunity. And a couple of the smart ones who got this, they're like, Daniel doesn't sell Bitcoin, but it seems like his language. So they screenshotted it, they sent it over to my wife, and they said, is Daniel into Bitcoin? And she said, no, Daniel wouldn't do that. They said, well, there must be a fake account. And within just a couple of hours, there was hundreds of conversations taking place with my audience, and it was all happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
So we all reported that account. But then quickly over the past 2 weeks, I must be getting at least 50 new friends from Nigeria saying hello every day. All these attractive women in bikinis who I don't know messaging me saying, hello, would you like to talk? But it's just flooded in. And it's quite interesting, even on social media, I now see it more so than email. So there's 5 examples that I found today that were the top 5 in cybercrime.
Yeah.
First of all was the phishing. And I think that's the one where, hey, click this link and win $1 million.
Yeah.
Second one is the cyber extortion.
Yeah.
thirdly, the data breach, the fourth, the identity theft, and fifthly, the harassment.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we prepare for this? How can we prepare our psychology so we're not a victim of cybercrime?
The key thing to understand with all of these attacks is they are targeting the emotional part of the brain. They are targeting the emotions and they getting you to react. Majority of the integrations or the attacks that these fraudsters are using, or these criminals, you'll see that the message is structured in a way to target fear or anger. The key thing is fear, because fear of loss will always get a reaction out of a person to prevent losing access or to ensure that everything is okay. Now, the messages can also be structured in a way to get a reaction. So in the case of where your account was cloned, they were using impersonation. They were using the same language, the presentation, everything else. So they were very, very careful to cultivate the way that they did it. And that's using content that's already posted to get engagement out of people and to get that reaction. So what it is that they're misusing trust. And that's another way that they do it. That's why phishing emails, all of these other things, they're using a certain amount of trust aspect, but then layering fear into that so that you can then start reacting to what it is that people are saying. And that's a way is that once they got people engaged and starting those conversations and start to react to it, that's the next step where you start using the psychological processes of trust, engagement, and also reciprocation to get people to start reacting and engaging and continuing with the conversations. The key thing is understanding how your body reacts and how you physically and also emotionally react to the messages. Once you understand how you feel when you're reading the content, then it means that you can start stepping away or having a certain pause in your thinking and say, is this exactly what they're saying? How true is this? And then just taking a pause. The big thing that I can suggest to people, if it feels wrong, step away for 5 minutes and come back. Don't react to it. Take your time.
For my audience, you've heard me talk about this before, it's the emotional hijack.
Yeah.
And the emotions become so hot that we bypass rational thinking. And so this is really, in my language, is we've got to be emotionally intelligent here online. We've got to be aware of our own emotional response. And I agree with this reaction of fear of loss. Fear of loss is 2.5 times more of a powerful motivator than desire. And I think a lot of people don't understand how this works. But if you're a parent, you can ask your children to clean their room. And if they do, you'll give them a biscuit. If they clean their room and make their bed, you're going to take them for a walk in the park. But when that doesn't happen, what do? You threaten to take away their toys. And before you've even finished the sentence, bang, because that fear of loss, the children have already cleaned the room, made the best, cleaned the windows and smiling and on their best behavior. So we've got to be emotionally aware of this. And then what Lance is talking about as well, it's our emotional regulation.
Yeah.
How do we deal with this? And if it's the first time you've been a victim of cybercrime, then you're going to be ignorant. Now, all of us are ignorant, but we could learn from Lance today on just how to step back and take a pause and to ask ourselves some better questions.
Yeah.
So for us to get educated, Lance, and to learn more about preparing for cyber theft, because I would say after working in a pawnbroking business for 17 years, I saw a lot of idiots. And when I say idiots, they were idiots who stole from their parents and came to the pawnbroking business and tried to pawn their parents' items. So they were idiots. But I believe that these people who are doing the cybercrime are highly intelligent people. If they know about psychology and human behavior, they're intelligent criminals. So where can we learn more about you and follow what you're doing and hopefully prevent this in our life and in the life of our friends?
Okay. We are now building out some content. I've started creating more content for LinkedIn. One of the things I started talking about is digital identity, digital footprint. So that ties into how and why they targeted you. They looked at your digital identity and they looked at your digital footprint, and then they use that information to then target your followers. It's the same thing with businesses. The other thing that I'm doing is that I've got my podcast, which I interview people like psychologists and neuroscientists and people that do meditation to understand exactly how you think and you process information. Understanding how that happens allows you to then use things like emotional intelligence and your emotional awareness to know how you can regulate and manage the information. So that's how I'm starting to engage with people a lot more. There is a new link that I'm creating, which will then take people to an introduction into cybersecurity, digital identity, to understand your digital footprint, and then learning how you can use these psychological principles to understand how you react. And the key thing that I've learned is that the way that you can control your reaction to content and to other people as well is breathing. Breathing is the best, fastest, and most accurate way that you can interrupt your emotional reaction to any kind of situation. And it's something very, very simple that people can do very, very easily. That's part of the reason people say is that if you're reacting to something, take a deep breath and count to 10. And what that does is it gives you a bit of a pause, and it changes your focus on the counting. And the breathing is a way that you can signal your brain through your body to relax. So that's why you take a deep breath through the nose and you exhale very slowly, and then you count to 10. And that immediately gives you a pause to then allow you to think more logically and use the prefrontal cortex instead of the limbic part and the more primal part of your brain.
I was reading a report recently, and they said that when we have an emotional hijack, when those emotions get too strong, we can lose up to 30% of our IQ or our thinking ability.
Yeah.
And if you're getting scammed, like anybody who's scammed, I remember being in Spain, as we spoke before. I was in the UK. I went down to Spain and I saw the pickpockets on the Rambler down there. Mm. And it was a highly intelligent organisation. And when I realised I'd been pickpocketed, I couldn't think clearly. I was angry, but I was also fearful at the same time. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to follow Lance. I want you to go over to his link tree, Thinking Like a Genius. I'm going to put the link into the show notes below. And all you need to do is click on that and learn more about this. And don't be a victim of cyber crime. Prevent it and make sure it doesn't happen to you. Lance, thank you so much for being here with us today. And any final thoughts from you about cyber security?
The key thing is having more awareness and don't rush it. If a business really needs to get in contact with you, they will either call you or they'll contact you again. Fraudsters always focus on fast and getting people to react. So take your time. That's a key thing that I tell anybody when it comes to any kind of situation.
Excellent advice. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, one new idea at the right time is enough to make you rich, or it could help you avoid being a victim of cybercrime. So thank you so much for joining us, Lance. Ladies and gentlemen, click the link tree link below, Think Like a Genius, and be sure to follow Lance today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Ciao for now.
Take care.